thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be making a vegetable pot pie. So I'm just going to start by cutting my onion. So this is definitely a weekend recipe, I would say. It's a little more time consuming than your normal 30-minute dinner recipe. So I like to bring this one out when I'm trying to impress people. So I thought it was important for you to have it in your arsenal. It's an impressive dish and not very difficult to make. So we love those. So we're going to start with dicing our onion in our usual fashion, nice and small, into bite-sized pieces. And then I'm going to go ahead and dice up the mushroom. If you guys don't like mushroom, your family doesn't like mushrooms, feel free to leave those out. I cut them up nice and small because I have some people that like them and some people that don't. And the people that don't like them don't notice that they're even in there. So they add just a little bit of protein because this is a vegetarian dish and a nice umami flavor. So even if you don't like mushrooms, I would strongly encourage you just to cut them up nice and small and still leave them in the dish and give it a try that way before just leaving them out altogether. Okay, so our onion's nice and chopped. You do have the option of using fresh veggies for the carrots, and you can throw celery into this dish. Or you can use canned, which is what we're going to do today. I actually didn't have canned, so I'm going to use a frozen mixed veggie. Just makes it just that much faster, just to toss it in. So we're going to, again, dice our mushrooms nice and small. I've taken off the mushroom stem and given them a good wash and also dried them off to make them easier to handle. All right, so we're almost done with our mushroom chop here. Does look like a lot of mushrooms, but they lose quite a bit of shape and cook down a lot. So you won't have this many when you're through cooking them. So we're gonna make a delicious filling today with our mixed vegetables, our mushrooms and onions, and with a lovely biscuit topping. Hopefully I can fit all my mushrooms in this bowl. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut the garlic really quick. Give it a good smack. I'm going to use 4 cloves of garlic. More garlic, the better. This recipe is also very easy to make dairy-free and animal-free for my dairy-free and vegan friends. So you can just sub out the butter and milk with dairy-free butter and milk. Nobody will notice. That's how we make it in our house. You can use veggie broth. You can use chicken broth. You can use, Better Than Bouillon has a no chicken broth, which is absolutely delicious. And that's what I'll be using today is the no chicken. So it tastes like chicken, but no chickens were harmed in the process. Okay, so we've got all of our veggies chopped up and ready to go. Now we're going to step over to the stove and start making our delicious filling. Okay, so I've got my saucepan warming up over a medium heat. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. If you want to keep it oil-free, you can just add the same amount of water. And then once my oil is warm, I'm gonna go in with my onion. I'm gonna turn the pan down a little bit because I don't want the onion to burn or get too brown. We're looking for a nice, soft, translucent onion. We'll go in with our salt and pepper. We're gonna season. Every time we add something to the pan, ideally you want to season it. We'll just give these onions a little stir, make sure that they don't burn or brown too much. And we're gonna let these cook for about 2 to 3 minutes until, again, they're nice and soft and they've turned translucent. All right, so our onions are looking beautiful. We're gonna go in with our garlic. Garlic in the pan. Be careful not to let your garlic burn. So you're just gonna move it around for about 30 seconds to a minute until you can smell it. We just wanna kind of cook out the sharpness of the garlic. Just let it aromatize. The garlic and onions smell absolutely delicious. So now I'm going to add our mushrooms. Give those a good stir. I'm also going to add a little more salt and pepper. Just to ensure everything is well seasoned at every layer. Okay, so our mushrooms are going to cook down probably about 10 minutes. You want them to lose most of their moisture. Be nice and small. While our mushrooms are cooking down, it's a great time to start prepping for your biscuits. So I would measure out your flour if you haven't already done that. Measure out your butter, measure out your milk, get everything ready to go so that when we're thickening up the sauce, because once we get everything in here and we're going to thicken up the sauce, you can turn around and finish up your biscuits and everything will be ready to go into the oven around the same time. If that sounds like too much work, then feel free just to cook the filling, get the filling done, and then you can start on your biscuits. That's totally fine too. Okay, so our our mushrooms have cooked right down and released all of their moisture, and they're maybe like a quarter of the size that they were when we tossed them in the pan. So they smell amazing, cooked with the onions and garlic. We're gonna add 2 teaspoons of thyme to this. And I don't have a teaspoon thing, I don't know where it is. So I'm just gonna measure my hand. So I'm gonna eyeball how much 2 teaspoons looks like. Okay, we'll give this a little stir. If anything is kind of sticking to the bottom, make sure you scrape that off. Those are all delicious pieces of flavor that you do not want to leave hanging around in the pan. Okay, so now we're going to add our flour. So we're going to add our flour into the pan. Give it a good stir to make sure everything is well coated. This is what's going to help the sauce thicken right up, be super creamy and delicious. So we kind of want to let this cook here for about a minute, stirring constantly, just to let the flour brown ever so slightly. It's going to soak up all the moisture left over in those mushrooms. And again, make sure you scrape off anything that's kind of sticking to the bottom. We want all that goodness in our sauce. Okay, so you can see that the mixture is kind of browned a little bit here. So now is when we're going to go ahead and add our broth. Okay, so we're going to turn down our heat closer to low. Now your broth will be in powder form, so you'll need to add water to it. That's what I've done here to rehydrate. So you're gonna need 2.5 cups of water. This is 1 cup, and then I'm just gonna grab a little bit more. So we're slowly gonna add this in. Make sure you whisk as it's going in. You don't want anything to get lumpy. And you're gonna see as you do that it gets kind of creamy right away. Okay, so I'm just gonna turn around and grab my other 1.5 cups of water. Okay, that's 1. I'm gonna whisk that in. If you don't have a whisk, you can use a fork. So just to clarify for you, that first batch of broth that I dumped in had all of my teaspoons of broth. So 2.5 teaspoons of broth were mixed into that 1 cup, which is why you see me now just adding the water. And the reason that I do that is because I don't have a measuring cup that's big enough to hold 2.5 cups of water or 2.5 cups of the broth. So I just mix it into a little bit of the water and then add more as I go. Okay, so this is nice and combined. We have no lumps. I'm gonna give it a little more whisk, and I'm gonna add milk. So I'm using macadamia nut milk. You can use regular milk, almond milk, soy milk, any kind of milk. This is any kind of milk you have. This is just the kind that I happen to have in my fridge. Most often I cook with soy milk. It's just a personal preference of mine. And I usually try to use, if I use dairy-free milk, a fortified milk so that you're still getting the added vitamins and nutrients that are added to milk products. Okay, so now that this is all whisked in and combined, we are going to bring this up to a simmer and let it simmer for about 10 minutes to really thicken up. So I've got my heat set in between low and medium just to bring it up to a simmer. Keep a good eye on it. You don't want it to go into a rolling boil or anything like that. So keep a little bit of an eye on your temperature. And while this thickens up, we are going to start our biscuits. All right, so we're ready to do our biscuits. I have already pre-measured my ingredients, and I'm going to use a sifter. If you don't have a sifter, dump your ingredients into your bowl and whisk them together with either a fork or a whisk. So the purpose of this is to just get some air into the flour and to mix the ingredients, because when you measure your flour and you press it down with the knife, it gets compacted, and that can make for tough biscuits. So we want to really fluff them up so we get that beautiful fluffy texture. So typically when I make my biscuits, I get a little extreme with it, and I put my bowl and my pastry cutter in the fridge so that they're super nice and cold when I'm cutting in my butter. And the reason for that is you want to try and keep your butter as cold as possible. So mine just came out of the fridge. So I'm going to toss it in here. You can cut up your butter if you'd like into small chunks. I'm just going to go ahead and use a pastry cutter. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you can use 2 knives. You can use your hands, but it does melt the butter. So just beware. Some on my fingers. So I'm just going to cut it in with my pastry cutter until your texture is similar to sand. And you don't have any large chunks of butter left over. So you want to work quickly here. Don't overmix it, because you definitely do not want, again, tough biscuits, so you don't want to activate the gluten in the flour. So you can see here, it's a really similar texture to sand, and I don't have any large chunks of butter left over. Make sure you get it all, if you're using a pastry cutter, get everything out. Okay, so I'm gonna go in with my milk. My milk's cold. I'm using macadamia nut milk again, and I also used a vegan butter. I used Melt. So pour it kind of right into the middle. I made a little well and poured the milk in. I'm not gonna use all of it. I'm gonna just give it a quick toss here and see where my texture is at, because you definitely don't want them to be too watery. So we're just gonna toss really lightly. Don't get in there and mix them. You will end up with tough biscuits. Okay, this actually looks pretty good the way that it is. The dough is sticking together well. So I'm not gonna add this extra milk. What I am gonna do is grab my bag of flour. I'm gonna lightly flour my surface. Also take a peek at my filling, make sure it still looks good over there. Okay, lightly flour your surface. If you have a round cookie cutter, perfect, use that. I'm gonna use my glass. Okay. So kind of turn everything over onto your surface here. You're gonna form it. Again, try not to handle your dough too much. You don't want to melt your butter. You kind of want those nice pockets of butter that will melt into your biscuits while they're cooking. So we're going to flatten this out until it's about 3/4 of an inch thick. Don't get too perfect or fussy about it. Just get it flat. And we want to try to make 6 biscuits. So we're going to press down, twist, 4, and try to make sure that they are all similar in size. If you need to take your remnants and get them back into a ball to make an extra one, definitely do that. I probably made mine a little thin. So I'm going to mix this back up. There we go, that's a little bit better. This one's a little thin. Let's mix them back in. Okay, that looks better. Went a little too thin there. Okay, I'm gonna give my hands a wash, and then we're gonna plate and go into the oven. Okay, so we're back over to our filling. It's nice and thick. If you want it a little bit thicker, feel free to add more flour. How you would do that is take some of the gravy out of the pan, mix your flour into it to make sure there's no lumps, and then reincorporate it. If you add more flour to this right now, you're just gonna get thick lumps of flour, and nobody wants that. Okay, so I've got my frozen veggies here. Again, you can use canned as well. Just gonna dump those in. I'm using a mixed vegetable. It's peas, carrots, and corn. Celery is really good in this dish. You would add it at the same time that you cook down your onion. Green beans, all sorts of things will work in this dish if you really want to juice up that vegetable content. So I do recommend at this point that you taste your mixture and adjust your seasonings if necessary. Maybe you need a little more salt and pepper, maybe you don't. Beautiful. So now I'm going to take this to our pie plate and dump it in. I'm using, actually I should probably show you. I'm just using a deep dish pie dish that I have. You could use a 9x9 casserole dish also. If you've doubled the recipe or made a larger batch, you can use a larger casserole dish as well. And this I think is going to fit perfectly in here. So I've already preheated our oven to 425 degrees. I'm gonna bring our biscuits over and put these right on top. Try to make sure that they are touching. And we definitely, glad that we made more biscuits. So just gently place them on top. Okay, and then we are going to brush them with some butter that I melted. Really gentle here. You don't want them to sink too far into your filling. Okay, so this is gonna go in the oven for 25 or 35 minutes. What you're looking for is a nice lightly browned biscuit and the filling to be bubbling. Middle rack of your oven. In we go. I'm gonna set a timer for 25 minutes and check on it at that point and see if we need to cook it any longer. Okay, so we've been cooking for just under 25 minutes and I took a look and the biscuits are done. So I'm gonna take it out a bit early. So I probably should have put a pan underneath it to catch all the drippings, but you can see that the filling is bubbling nicely and the biscuits are done. I hope you enjoy.